Deep. Can I make an excuse? Like, can I use a physical excuse for an audio based kind of like creative outlet like this? I don't know. I'm in pain. I have a weird neck thing, but regardless, I have been pushing this English episode like more than I wanted to originally. It has become sort of my brand. The going back to the past, quote the past, is not that far away, but from the present, like comparing opinions as they mature over time. Well, Captain America Civil War, the movie I'm about to tackle in this week, just turned 10 years old last week or last week, 1 or 2 weeks ago. And of course, this is a momentous time because 10 years is no small thing, you know? Who knows if I'll be alive in 10 years from now? I might not get to see whatever they're trying to make again. But, anyways, a lot of kind of like retrospective and flashbacks were shared throughout social media from Marvel specifically, remembering and praising this movie. So, without further ado, I think it's a great movie. It's been great since it came out, or has it? Now, if we're gonna try to compare things between present and future, it's kind of like pertinent, or is pertinent the word? But it's the right thing to do, to sort of think about your parameters then and think about your parameters now. There's one parameter that completely sort of survived the test of time for me when thinking about Captain America Civil War. Of course, the first one, and this is the parameter that I'm thinking of, is the comparison with the comic book storyline. The one thing that comparing it with the comic book storyline shows you by comparing the past and the present is how it worked, but at the same time, it sort of revealed its weakness at the same time. Excuse me. What do I mean by this? Um, Civil War, the storyline in the comics, was this huge event which basically created a schism right in the middle of the Marvel universe on overall, right, the whole universe. And the main issue was always related to dimensions. Like, it's good that we're talking about the repercussions of meta or superhumans in society, which is kind of like the core of Civil War, which is easily adaptable between comics and movies, because it's sort of like transversal topic or a transversal issue to tackle and think about. But the thing that time shows for this argument when thinking about this movie, to me, is the argument of repercussions. What do I mean by this? When Civil War happened, of course, the immediate kind of like conclusion, or how do you say, like, yeah, the immediate result of it was the schism between the Avengers and everything, and that gets you thinking, how important or everlasting is this? You take it to both the comics and the movies, and both have since pretty much forgot about it. You can still find some reference to it, mostly in comics. I don't think that they do so in the live action. I think in the live action, the most they do for remembering the past is remembering the events of any Avengers movie, or now the blip, right? What led to Avengers Endgame. But nobody really remembers the Sokovia Accords, as they call them in the movies. In the movies' defense, that doesn't happen that often in the comics either. Even more so. I don't think I've like I'm trying to like review my mental memories of it. But regardless, even if it's mentioned occasionally, it's not something that it's prominent or even like relevant. in the current Marvel comic universe nowadays, something like whatever. I think they made like a Civil War thingy like recently, but of course it never gets to the dimensions that it has now. Even if both movies and comic forgot this kind of like element of, oh, are you against or for these laws or the responsibility of metahumans? Even if they both forgot them, one thing that the movie could never replicate from the comics was the permanence of it. And what do I mean by this? No matter if you choose to remember it or not, whatever side you took during any event on the comics is gonna live with the character forever. And I think that is the main issue forever. If you think about most of the actors and characters involved in Civil War, how many of them are even still there? Of course, they are bringing back some of them for Endgame, but it's clearly gonna be some parallel universe sort of cameo situation, right? They're not really coming back. Sometimes you often forget how you are living in a live action Marvel universe where there's no Captain America nor Iron Man. But that's the reality of it. So, does that kind of like impacts the movie if you watch it now in 2026? And I have to be honest, it did. I saw this movie recently, like last week or something. It really did. It really made you feel like the tension of it was gone. And it's kind of like an interesting point to think about. Because these movies, the MCU movies, for some reason, they were always short-lived. They were always short-lived. Yeah, short-lived. There was always how do you call something that is fated to die? Human. Perishable. That's the thing. But that is the train of thought led me to think about that, and how so many of these movies and so much of this world, especially before Avengers Endgame, was created this particular ambience, this kind of like mist of possibility, where you often forgot that these people were so limited. Like Robert Downey Jr., basically the godfather of the current MCU. He's like what, like 60 something currently? He was already an old man when he began Iron Man, I think. Well, regardless of that, you sort of lived in this fictional universe where these characters had the immortality that they have in the comic books. And to this day, I wonder how did we buy into it? Because when some of these actors left many of the Marvel projects, people that love the characters went bonkers, and like understandably so. Like we don't have Iron Man, and we're not counting Endgame because it's gonna be a cameo. A cameo. We don't have out of this in this movie. We don't have Iron Man. We don't have Black Widow. We don't have Captain America. We don't have Scarlet Witch. These are characters that are not in the MCU. If they come back in sort of cameos, it's just gonna be that, a cameo, right? Who knows if I don't think Wanda is gonna cameo in Vision Quest. I'm not sure. But anyways, the point is, looking back at Captain America: Civil War and thinking about it from this comic book perspective, you can only conclude, in my opinion, that the adaptation was perfect, but the passing of time just showed you how fickle it was. In a way, how pointless it was. You know, I think that one of the heroes that got put into prison by the end of this movie, how many of them actually mention that later? I think when they go pick up Hawkeye, he's like, yeah, I'm free, but like I have some things. And Ant-Man, of course, is in the second one, or I think it's the second one where he's under, yeah, the second one where he's under house arrest, right? Like we all get a little bit of glimpse of that. But the point is that the passing of time has shown that this argument, I mean, this plot line, was just a momentary thing, which is fitting for this format. But what does that mean in practical terms as you watch this movie? It highlights that this movie has basically two sides. It has two parallel plot lines that sort of linked between each other at some point, but they mostly go their separate ways. One of these plot lines is the one regarding the Sokovia Accords and the superhero control responsibility, whatever, right? And the other one is Simo's. Is it like Major Simo in this movie? And the other one is Simo trying to dismantle the heroes. Now, as I've been talking, the Sokovia Accords plotline, it's understandable, it's enjoyable, it's pertinent, it holds to the comic book format of it, but ultimately it's just for this movie. It doesn't really have major repercussions, and the fact that live action has the limitations of the actors themselves makes this a plotline kind of like a meh. But when you focus on Simo's plotline, there we have a problem with the movie. The more you watch the movie and the more you think about Simo's plot, which basically was to get Iron Man to fight with Captain America because Captain America knew that the Winter Soldier had killed Tony Stark's parents. That was it. And the more I see it, the more I think about it, the more I dislike it. First of all, the motivation of Simo was like, oh, my family died during the Sokovia thing. Okay, so it's just vengeance. And even at the end, spoiler, 10-year rule spoiler, even at the end where Black Panther faces him, he's like, you did all this for vengeance. Vengeance is no good for the soul. I will not be a victim of vengeance like you. Sorry for my accent. I just wanted to try it. I will not be a victim of vengeance. And they show you that how simple of a villain Seymour really is. And the fact that he went through all of this effort to make these guys into enemies, when you know the saying, this could have been an email. This could have been an email. The moment he had the information, and not even then, he didn't even need to have the full complete proof of Winter Soldier's murdering his parents. He didn't even need that. If he had written an email to Tony Stark, like letting him know or even implying in a strong way, like, hey, I think the Winter Soldier killed your parents and Captain America knows. I kept wondering, will that happen in that way would have meant that Tony Stark would have done things differently? Like, would the result would have been the same in my eyes. That wouldn't have changed the fact that Captain America knew about it and he didn't want to tell him. So the more this craftiness is revealed, the more absurd it becomes. Originally, when you watch this movie, the thriller elements of it are pretty interesting. They are well made. The progression of the thriller elements, which is basically Simo's plot, holds. It holds in a first viewing because you don't get the reasoning behind it until the end. As you watch Civil War for the first time and you hear the name Simo, you already have these grandiose ideas of him, of being the comic book villain, which is one of the biggest, mostly associated with Captain America villains, because he's basically a Nazi, right? He's just like a Nazi multiversal fascist. Like it's always about conquering. It's always about domination. But here, did he need to be Simo at all? He could have been just one guy. If you think about it, maybe it would have even been better for him to just be a guy who suffered the unintended consequences of the Avengers. You know, it could have been just a guy. It probably had been better in some ways. But anyways, you keep comparing all of these elements out of Captain America Civil War, and it just gets like, to me, its failings start to show. You know, as I've said, the Simo plan was weak. The repercussions of the Sokovia Accords were weak as well, and of course, you got into the one of the main arguments or criticism that has lived with this movie since it came out. It had too many characters. It was too much about setting up whatever was coming up. Was Endgame, right? Yeah, right. Endgame. And after all, it was called Captain America. And you wonder how much of a Captain America story this is at all. How much of his character we see him play, or like we see him evolve. The core of Captain America's participation in Civil War, in Captain America Civil War, none other, like a movie that bear his name, is his ideological posture over the Accords. Is this a good representation of Captain America? At most points in the movie, it seems that Tony Stark is more in the right because he delivers more arguments. So in the end, Captain America doesn't sign the Accords because he feels like he has a better judgment over when to intervene and be a hero than the UN. And of course, this is a real danger that, and he said so in the movie, what happens if they don't want us to intervene? It's so related to the idea of doing the right thing, right? But unlike the comic books, they don't go as hard in the politics of it. And I think that is an important key element of most Captain America lore that recently has come into a lot of discussion, especially for me as I'm like an avid comic book reader, and currently we are heading towards a Marvel event which is called Avengers Armageddon, and they put Captain America in a position of political relevancy where he had to intervene in Latveria after Doctor Doom's alleged demise. There's something to say about that, but it's a comic book spoiler. But anyways, in that context, it always shines how Captain America is Captain America, regardless of him being a perfect representation of his country or whatever. It's something that haunts him like a lot, and with proper like as it should, right? But in the past 10 years, they have kind of placed that responsibility more into the Falcon or Captain America. Sam has been more a political Captain America than Steve Rogers for a long time. So seeing him coming back to that position in the comics nowadays, it's a really fun thing to see. Basically, if we go back to the movie, I just keep wondering in that point. You know, at the end of Civil War, Iron Man goes like, "You don't deserve that shield. It was built by my father," and Captain America just throws him back the shield. But this is based merely on the emotional implications of both of them having, like, it's just all raw emotion. But the real politics of Civil War aren't there at all. You know, they downplay it so much. They go like, there's so much forgiveness, and at the end of the movie, Captain America goes to break out all of these other Avengers and heroes that were in prison during the movie, but nothing happens with that. You know, there's no outlaw Avengers or anything. It's heavily implied during Infinity War, I think, but it's not really a part of the movie or the plot or nothing that is further developed. But without keep um, like orbiting this issue, what's the point of of all of this? You are looking for elements of this movie that somehow either survive the test of time or justify the enjoyment of this movie in its own context. As I think about this, I keep like slamming my head, and that sounds funny. I keep slamming or like crashing against these elements. The comic book element comparison between Civil War, Captain America's real representation, or any of these characters for that matter. Ironically, probably Iron Man is the one that has the most development in this movie out of all of them. And the parallel plot lines and the weakness that is CMOS after the thriller is over. You think about all of those things, you think about them as limitations, because to me they are. But as I sit down reflecting on them, one answer comes to my mind about my enjoyment of this movie, and it's related to an element that I spoke of at the beginning. The fact that by some movie magic and some collective delusion, we thought this could last forever. You know, as I watched Civil War now, I kept feeling these romanticized emotions with some of the characters and plot lines. Of course, one of them being Black Panther. And the fact that they made this big ass movie with so many characters, still not being an Avengers movie, you know what it really created? It created that one moment of illusion where everything was possible. Like, think about it. Transport yourself to Captain America Civil War time. Thinking about the upcoming Avengers, we knew that the Infinity Stones were a thing. Like, there was so much information. They had so many characters. None of them seemed to be like even close to be out to disappear. Like, none of them. And suddenly you have Black Panther, and you have the Winter Soldier, like having his own reform, or like coming back to the light, turning good, however you want to call it, inside this movie. And you have that element, as I said. Ultimately, the civil war, ideological civil war between Captain America and Iron Man didn't last long, but at that moment in time, at that point during that movie, that spelled potential for new confrontations between them, for new discussions, for you know everything in this movie spelled potential. You saw the Vision after Age of Ultron becoming a character, talking, having a personality. uh, Wanda developing as well, even if she lost that weird accent she had. Black Widow coming into some sort of position of leadership. The repercussions for Rhodey as War Machine, right? And of course the introduction of Spider-Man, which was a great selling point. Like, side note about the introduction of Spider-Man, this is something that I have completely forgotten, and in this last viewing of this movie, just hated it. They completely fast-tracked Spider-Man's origin story. It's so freaky to see it now, like now in 2026. You know, Tony Stark goes to pick him up in Brooklyn, Manhattan, Brooklyn, right? Queens. He goes pick up Peter Parker in Queens, and he goes and he was like, "Oh, why do you do this?" And Peter says, "You know," he, he phrases it so weird. He says like, "You know, when some bad things happen, you know, if you have the abilities that I do, if those things happen, it's your fault that they happen." Some shit like that. I have never heard a more roundabout, dumb way to say with great power comes great responsibility. And he just does it. And it really feels super shallow. But back then, you just wanted to see Spider Man. Spider Man is here. In a way, it was more important to see him than his motivations of being there. Because back then we were still under the whole contract thing about who owns Spider-Man, how much could he appear, blah blah blah, contracts, blah blah. We were still under all of that pressure. But in the end, you just get the classic image of Spider-Man holding Captain America's shield, and you're like, whoa, hell yeah. You never think about these things, and it's been 10 years since then. And MCU's Peter Parker didn't get his Uncle Ben moment until the last movie where they kill Aunt May, which, if you ask me, was also kind of shitty. After everything he's done, he didn't really need the Uncle Ben moment, or in this case, the Aunt May moment. Did he need it at all? He didn't. He was already Spider-Man. You didn't have to make him more Spider-Man. You know? But anyways, that's just one thing about the movie. But it still holds to this argument of this movie being this perfect moment in time where everything was possible. Spider-Man was there, Black Panther was new, he could do so much shit, and at the end of the movie, Captain America is friends with Black Panther, they go to Wakanda, when they go like, oh, what are you gonna do if they come for Wakanda? And I'm not gonna do the accent. And Black Panther goes like, let them come. No, sorry. But anyways, I reached that great conclusion, that great kind of like learning out of this whole process. This movie is a flawed movie. It's fun. It's a fun movie because its thriller elements definitely hold for one viewing, not for several. But above everything, what hold this movie to this day, and even more so back in the day, was that out of all the MCU movies before Endgame, this is probably, well, in that case before Infinity War, this was probably the most prolific moment in time in the MCU as it regards to potential storylines, characters, visuals, like you had new armors, new suits, everything, powers. In this moment, during Captain America Civil War, everything seemed possible. Everything seemed possible. Sounds like I said Kim Possible for a minute there. And that's it. That's really it. I don't know if newer generations who didn't see this movie when it was current, I don't know if they could appreciate it as it was back then. I don't know how much it holds, like how much it you can sustain this concept of potential to this day. Because if you want to tell someone this argument about potential, they can always go like, yeah, but half of these actors are not here anymore, you know, some of them are old, some of them don't care, you know. I don't did Scarlett Johansson talk trash about it? I think she said she had a great time, or like it was time to move on. And that is one thing that always breaks my illusion on superhero live action things. when actors go like, yeah, it was time to move on. Imagine if that happened in comic books. If Black Widow at the end of one issue were like break the fourth wall and went like, yeah, I'm done, man. You know, imagine that. Like, yeah, I'm done with this character. Bye bye. You know, so that is the thing. I don't know if you can translate or make someone understand what it meant. So if I'm to celebrate or commemorate the 10th anniversary of Captain America Civil War, I'm gonna do it from my personal perspective, and I reached that final conclusion about it. This is a good movie, not really worth the many rewatches. It's really manipulative or convenient as far as it deals with a lot of characters, and its plot is kind of like weak, kind of like mid, because in the end it doesn't have bigger repercussions, but any and every flaw you can see in this movie is shadowed by the existence of the movie itself. And what I mean by this is what I've been saying as this final conclusion of my presentation. The potential. Even the crappiest element of the movie, which could be Simo, for example, had potential at this moment in time of becoming something else. And that is no small thing. So you probably left the theaters, as I did after watching Civil War, with so many imagination things or ideas, or like your mind was racing, thinking about the possibilities. So in this 10th anniversary, I'm gonna say Captain America Civil War is a really, really, really nice and beautiful memory of times when the MCU was full of possibilities and definitely way more enjoyable than now. You don't have to travel far to find people talking about their disenchantment or like their boredom or how they are done with the MCU. It's because of that, man. The bubble burst. Now these movies are a permanent fixture in Hollywood and in movie industry. They're probably always gonna be some superhero movies, but Marvel itself has brought down the rhythm a lot, releasing less things and everything. It's the same. Whenever you get something exciting, everything has an expiration date in live action. Everything. So even if you like something, these people won't last forever. For some reason, we didn't think it that much through back then. I loved Iron Man. Like Iron Man 1, I saw it in the theaters and I was like crazy for it. Give me the toys, give me the posters. I have like a folder to like notebooks, like give me everything. This is so amazing. It looks so good. Never in my wildest dreams back then, call me innocent or whatever, never really thought about how this came with an expiration date. Whether it be contracts, whether it be Robert Downey Jr.'s health, or like, I don't know, how believable he is to be playing these characters at certain age, like whatever the case it is. It never hit me. And it never did when Captain America Civil War was a current thing. Now, 10 years later, of course I see it. But what are you gonna do, man? Those memories will live forever. The memories of the Marvel Cinematic Universe when it was full of potential. Now it has some potential, but you always raise an eyebrow, like, you always look at everything with suspicion, and all you can hope for is just to have a good old time. You could say you could have done the same back in the day. Yeah, sure, you could have, but back then you were too deep into the illusion. You were too deep into it. You were like taken by it, living in their world, like you do when you read the comic books. But it was always an illusion, man. It was always a mirage. It was never meant to be. Even though, you know, Doomsday is gonna be full of cameos. Avengers cameo fest, but whatever. And that's it. That's it for me for this week, and for another movie, and for another Marvel thing, which will definitely not be my last time talking about Marvel. It's just part of my life by now. So, anyways, thank you all for listening. Thank you all for giving it your time, and hopefully you have your own ideas and your own emotions. Hopefully they are good, because nobody wants to feel shitty with entertainment. It is entertainment after all. But what if you like shitty things? Those are questions for the future. See you all next time. Bye bye.